Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Tyler Brown, head basketball coach, Stevenson School. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's dive in. Why don't you take us through your background in both as an athlete and then into your journey as a coach, right? What was the process for landing your first job, any subsequent jobs, and ultimately the one that you're sitting in now?
Yeah, it's a long, I guess it's not that long of a journey, but seems long now I'm looking back on it. And you've been a part of it for majority of it, but it started, I'm Sacramento born. I was at El Camino High School graduate. So I was fortunate enough to play my last 2 years. I had some early adversity in my first 2 years there. And at the end of the day, I just wasn't good enough to transition. I didn't know if I wanted to attend college. I had this idea that I was gonna own a restaurant and be like this master chef. I used to watch food TV a lot growing up. So I didn't really know if basketball or sport in general was going to be in my future past high school, as I just didn't know if I was going to take on this entrepreneur route or whatnot. Once I got through my senior season, I decided I wanted to play more. Had some real intentional conversations, and the sum of that was you're not good enough. So how do I now become flexible in my journey, but stubborn in my goal? And the goal was wanting to play. And so I was really stubborn in that process, and I didn't really care what it looked like, but didn't necessarily have aspirations to go to junior college, but I was open to it because I was open to anything to keep the ball bouncing. So that landed me down in Monterey, where I attended MPC, played for Coach Blake Spearing for 2 years. Then I was fortunate enough to transition onto the four-year university and play at Humboldt State. So I spent 3 years there at HSU and was a part of some good teams that were able to do some really good things, had some incredible teammates that were able to do some special things. Some of those guys are still coaching right now at the collegiate level and at the Division I level, which is an exciting thing to see. And then from there, I went home and started life like as a normal adult. I was going to help my older brother coach at Ponderosa High School up in the hills just outside of Sacramento. And that was when I reached out to you. I reached out to you to ask for a workout that we did in high school. And you responded to me and said, "Do you want to coach college basketball?" And I was like, "I just graduated, barely have a bachelor's degree." You might not even remember this conversation. And you're like, in typical Clymo fashion, you're like, "That doesn't matter. I'll take care of everything else. I just want you to call this person." And that person was Rob Bishop. And he, at the time, was the head coach at Cal State Monterey Bay, a team that up until my senior year in college, I had never lost to. And I don't know if Humboldt State had ever lost to, but class of 2013, we took an L to the Otters. So he was familiar with me a little bit just from playing and things like that, obviously seeing people in the league. And he had an opportunity and he asked if I wanted to come to join. And at the time, I was just cut from the umbilical cord of my parents of you are an adult, you are out of college, our support is going to look minimal to none. We will put you in a house, you have a roof over your head, but everything else is like going to be on you. And I understood that was a conversation that we had for multiple years leading up to it because my younger brother was on a similar track that I was, and I wanted to be able to provide resources. And he didn't go away for junior college. He stayed local and went to CRC. He was going to need some support potentially, depending on what his journey looked like as he transitioned to the 4 year, which we didn't know at the time. So he calls. We have this long conversation. It was great. He appreciated my recommendation. From there, he offered me a unpaid position, and with the short notice and just things that were going on, didn't have the opportunity. I then got a full-time job, just being an employer, and I was working at Tiffany and Company in the Roseville Galleria, which is an interesting job in itself. I've had a lot of those, I feel like. And so I'm working at Tiffany's, and I'm starting to realize that in order to be a full-time employee, and to be a full-time coach, it's almost not realistic. I didn't have the understanding of balancing the time. I knew I needed to make income to get past whatever needs I had, which weren't very much at the time, but still it was a couple $100s that I had to figure out where I was gonna come up with the funds. So I'm doing that whole deal. And at the end of the day, like just needing a paycheck and a consistent one at that, and just trying to get on my feet and just what the expectation was. So very quickly, I realized that I was not going to continue to help at Ponderosa High School. So this is all like happening at the same time. So I had to make a phone call and was like, "Hey, I originally was hesitant about it because I didn't think I had it in general. I didn't think Coach Kinder at Humboldt State had offered me an opportunity to stay on and be a grad assistant, But I just remember talking to Aaron Hungerford, who was an assistant at the time, and I was like, dude, I don't want to do what you do. I see the stuff that you guys do. Up late on the weekends, washing laundry, some of the players you got to deal with, and just like, I want absolutely no part of that. And he's like, you should give it a try. You should give it a try. I think you'd be good at it. And so I'm holding on to that thought process, but I'm not putting it all together. And then we get to the phone call where I have to call who Troy Selby at the time is the head coach at Pondo. And I'm like, hey, I don't think I'm gonna be able to help out. And so I just go to work. And then fast forward to March, phone rings, random day. Coach Bishop, he's like, hey, I just want to let you know I've been working on this all season and season just ended for us. I'm gonna have an opportunity. It's not $0, but it's not a lot of money. Would you take it if I can get something to work? And I was like, I don't know. What's a lot of money? Again, I had spent some time there. I was trying to figure it out. And I just put it on pause. Fast forward a little bit further. I'm coaching AAU. At this time, I'm kind of like, I'm leaning that way, but I haven't really confirmed it. Like, I just didn't know yet. And then I had an unfortunate, tragic event where I lost my older brother in that same year. So this is July of 2020, 2014 now. And so just graduated college in 2013. This is that following July. And then I just remember calling Coach Bishop and saying, hey, that job you were talking about, I'm going to take it. And I think in his mind it was already a done deal, but in my mind it wasn't. I was very like hesitant on it. And I just remember loading up my car with my dad, going down there. So we got this room. It's $300 that was with Coach Nate Geiser, who's coaches at Bellevue in Nebraska right now. And he was just like, this room's like $300. It was military housing. So it was over in CSUMB, like the Fredericks Park. And that was it. I think I showed up on August 21st and school started on August 23rd. And I was in workouts and drills second week of school, and then just never looked back on the coaching journey. So that was a long way to get there. And then from there, I was fortunate enough to spend some time at CSUMB, San Francisco State, and Cal State Fullerton. And then that's now landed me here at Stevenson on my fourth year, but second year as a head coach in the role. So just been a journey ever since.
Can you dive into the transition between Cal State Monterey and SF State, and then the transition to Fullerton and what that was like until COVID hit, obviously, and then you came back to the peninsula? But just give a little bit there in regards to background before we dive deeper into the coaching journey.
Yeah, Cal State Monterey Bay, get an opportunity to go there and coach. And I was super appreciative looking back on it because when you see other people come in, they don't always get like the opportunity to coach. And I will always appreciate Coach Bishop for giving me the opportunity to coach. We would sit in pre-practice meetings, and on day one, you were running drills. I was running drills in practice, trying to like maintain it and just provide any and everything that I had, knowing that relationships was going to be the best thing going for me, and knowing that trying to grow not just basketball players but young men was going to be a part of the process, realizing that our head coach and our players didn't look alike. So I was going to be the bridge to helping his message get to them. And that just is what it is. I think Coach Bishop loves his guys and he has great relationships with them, but there was going to be some conversations that I was going to be able to have that he wasn't going to be able to have. And they were conversations that were needed for those young men. I was able to be there. I was able to be 2 feet in. I was able to be out recruiting. I was able to coach. And so I feel like in that first 3 year stint, I had a jersey, I got to do it. So I'll always be appreciative for that. Another person you put me in contact with was Dedrick Taylor, who was someone that you said, if you're serious about this, you need to get under somebody that does it for real. And that wasn't a knock. That was just like, there's a way to be in the college space and there's a way to carry yourself and all of that. So I started conversations with him in my first year, and he had a event called Think Tank. And Think Tank was a lot of people of color, coaches that were in the space, that had been in the space, coming together to just have conversation about what the journey looked like and trying to pour into each other to help each other along the way. It's a pretty incredible model. It just takes a lot of time to do and organize, but he was a great resource to that. And the reason why I bring up the CSUMB think tank opportunity is because in there you were with a lot of vets, like you were with a lot of dudes that just they had experience and they had been around stuff and they were able to just tell and share stories where like for me, I was like, dang, that's what it's like. Like it was a grind. Like you're really opening your eyes up to what college coaching is. And I don't think a lot of people get it. And you really have to live it a little bit to understand it. And then it's also living it as like a single person and living it with like responsibilities, like a family and kids and things like that. Like it's a lot. And so just understanding that balance. And so the think tank was interesting to hear some of those guys that were older that had gone through all of those types of things. They were in coaching when they had their first child, or they were in coaching when they first got they married, or they were in coaching and they were still trying to figure out their degree situation, or they had to uproot and move across the country. So like all these different stories and things that were going on, they were able to give you some wisdom and perspective. And so in that meeting that first time, Coach David Carter, who's a legend, and he had the opportunity to be a head coach at University of Nevada. He was on staff at Georgia. At that time, he was on staff with at St. Mary's with Coach Randy. And I would go watch practice. He would invite me down, like, Tyler, always pick up the phone, call if you need anything. Like, he's a super cool dude to the point where, like, I remember one of my first recruiting trips after that and walking up to him. And he actually, I was nervous to say hi. Like, you're always like, that's one of the things I tell you, go talk up to people, start a conversation. And he would come up and just shake my hand. I just thought he was the coolest dude. And I'll always appreciate him for that. But one of the things that he told me was, you're not really in this business until you get fired. Like, it happens to everybody. And in my mind, I was like, I've never been fired from anything. But knowing what I know now, my welcome moment came in the 2017, 2018 season when our staff got let go. And then I was really like, my eyes were open to, okay, this is real. This is a business. And so at that same time, I had, or excuse me, 2016, 2017. So I had, my son was on the way at the time in May of 2017. So in March of 2017, I now lose my job and then going to become a father. And I'm like, I'm trying to chase a dream and a passion, and I don't know which way is up. And oh, by the way, I got a baby on the way. And so it's like, how do I figure all this out? I was lucky enough to get a phone call from Coach Vincent Glima. I also got a phone call from Paul Trevor, who's the head coach at Stanislaus, and Coach Glima's at San Francisco State. Both of those guys gave me job interviews, and I was able to get the job at San Francisco State, which made a little bit more sense for me at the time, just because my son was still in Monterey and I was now living in Oakland. And so I was able to commute, put 40,000 miles on my car, going back and forth in 1 year to go see him on top of like the recruiting and all those other things, commuting every day from Oakland to San Francisco. These are 26 miles from where I was living to get to San Francisco, which is San Francisco State, which is in Daly City, damn near. And if you just do the math on what that looks like on top of the 2 hour commute, give or take, of traffic. So you are up by about 5:30 in the morning. Um, to get to the office by 8 to be there, and then to like just be boots on the ground all day with whatever the work looks like. So yeah, it was just a lot. And then trying to manage like what being a dad was. From there, full circle moment, I had an opportunity to join the staff with Coach Taylor down at Cal State Fulton, who's still there, and work with him. And I was there for 2 years until COVID hit. And that brought me back to the peninsula, which I'm here now. Yeah. That's the latter. I think that covers it.
Yeah, perfect. Appreciate the full transition into what the current situation is. Your track record of mentors and people you had played for and worked for would, in theory, give you a great foundation for ascending to your own opportunity to be a head coach. Even with that, what did you realize right away that you still needed to figure out when you took over 2 years ago? Talk a little bit about those things that you're prepared, you're ready, but you're really not ready until you get in the seat and you got to figure some things out on your own.
Yeah, I think first being an assistant is such a unique space because again, I was given the advice of like, you're an assistant coach, your coach is going to tell you to shut the front door at some point, and you still got to give them ideas. You still got to come with them. They may not like the recruit, they may not like this, but that can't discourage you. And me being me, I had heard no a lot early in life. And so because I had heard no, it never really hurt my feelings when people no to me. And so I took out of that confidence, and whether it was a recruit, whether it was a drill or an idea, I just applied it to everything. And I say that to say that's who I was as an assistant. And moving over to have that energy now come from other people was a unique experience at first. Like I thought I was prepared for it and I thought I was being empowering, but now that I think about it, I think I like you have to coach your coaches on like how you want them to be. Like you want them to be confident. You like they all have something about them that they are bringing to the table. Like how do you allocate their resources to who's the relationship guy, who's your X's and O's guy, who may or may not manage the subs. Like in college, you had a direct job. Like you were recruiting an area, you knew who you were recruiting, you knew your contacts, you went outside of that. You knew if you were the road guy, if you were the meals, you knew if you were the hotel, you knew if you had the vans or the flights, you know if you had the food or the pregame meal, like all of it was just very like organized and set. And so like you had a job and you covered a lot. I think when you moved over to the head coaching space at a high school level, like you in your mind, you think it's gonna run like that. And you're like, these are like high school kids. This is you gotta take your time. And just realizing that like I'm calling the timeout now. I used to sit on the bench and be like, yo, call one or yo, switch this. And it's very easy to throw that out there because it doesn't come back to you. And in this one, it's not comes back. I drew up that play and it was terrible and it didn't work, or I put the kid in that situation and they didn't score, or I didn't like I'm giving confidence to guys or I'm taking confidence away by my body language and the things that I say. It's just a very scripted, it's just intentional. More places, things are intentional. You got to think about more. And so I can imagine what that feels like at the college level. And I remember Coach Taylor always telling me, we'll have a lot of one-on-one conversations, but he would be like, it'd be late in his office going through stuff. And he'd be like, man, you can go home. You can go home. And I'm like, oh, it's all good. I just want to finish something up. And he'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, what are you working on? He's all the stuff. Everybody thinks it's all about X's and O's, but that's only a minuscule part of the job. And I would just we have conversation. You see it, right? Because I'm helping them like, hey, we got to go meet with this booster. Hey, we got to go set up this dinner. Hey, we got to go. So you see all that stuff. We're gonna go meet with this union on campus, and I'm responsible for taking players over there to do that or get stuff set up with academics. It's a lot, but you don't really know how much it is. There's no way like these dudes, there's a reason people like say that they're like crazy because like their mind never shuts off. Like they're always like, what's next? Even now, like when their season ends, like I got two phone calls the other day about kids. Like it's go time. Like it is, you're always on go. So you got to have a different type of energy for that. And I think you start to see that when you're a head coach for us, because we play like 3 games in a week, which is a lot, especially for kids that are multi-sport. I didn't get I got my athletes this year 5 days before we played our first game. And then after we played our first game, we played four more. And we had maybe 14 practices total in our 1 and 5. Like it's like the ball is up in the air, we're playing, and I don't even know who my guys are yet. And they're still getting into basketball shape. So it's a lot. So in these first 2 years of being a head coach, I think I've like learned to slow it down. Like I want to be so much more organized and detailed next year. And that's just, and I'm not any of those things, but I could be better. And it's like my life motto. Like I could be better at so many more things. So I just strive for that.
How would you say being involved as a teacher, both in your original day job, right? And now you've also taken on the dean of students role at the middle school. But how would you say that time in the classroom has bled over into your coaching? So when you were first getting into this, you were just a coach, right? Then you had to become a classroom teacher, air quote, right? Because you teach PE.
Yeah.
But I've always felt that being in that space and having those points of contact, and when I used to coach the middle school girls team, it gave me a different lens and different things that we could then try to apply. How have you, how would you say that has informed your journey as a coach since you started teaching 4 years ago?
Man, yeah. Well, there's been a lot of college coach conversations that I've been in where you are questioning how an individual got to be a certain way. Like whether it's executive functioning, and I use those terms because I'm in an educational space rather than kids being on time, being prepared, organized, and all those things. Kids understanding like what adversity is, how to push through the things that are and aren't important to them, priority wise, whether it's on the court or off the court. Like those building blocks happen right now, like middle school and high school, far more than they ever did in college. In college, I was always able to, for the most part, you're able to talk to kids about if you don't start changing some of the things that you're doing, the actions and behaviors, then you're going to go back to things that you, quite frankly, don't want to do. Whether it's a career field, whether it's just going home, you got to go back to live with mom and dad. Like some situations are worse than that. So it's, you got to maximize this opportunity that you are blessed with to get whatever you can out of this situation, whether it's playing basketball as long as you can, whether it's getting the degree to lead on to whatever's next. Like you got to maximize it. In my current journey, I'm teaching kids that like the things that we want them to maximize in college, like you're teaching them the priorities of that now. And so you are getting them to understand all the things that you're working on. So then when they get to that opportunity, they're going to have the skill set and the tools to maximize those opportunities. And so I feel like the lift is heavier on this end because they are sponges and they like you could push this in the right way or you could push it in the wrong way. And when we got like almost finished products at the ages of 18, 17, 18, 19, you have them and you're able to guide them and lead them for a 4 to 5 year journey. They're mature enough, but sometimes like those people are who they are. And so unless there's a major life thing that happens and God forbid, or where their mentality or their perspective changes, you're just trying to cultivate the best out of those kids. But you know, right now, if a kid is selfish, you can tell that in fifth or sixth grade. You know what I mean? So if they get out on the basketball court and they're selfish in freshman, sophomore year in high school, they were selfish a long time ago. That's not something new, right? And so it's like teaching kids how to do all those things, that starts at a far earlier age than people think. You don't just start having these conversations and all of a sudden everything's important now because you're 17. That's not real. You have to have conversations far earlier. And I say it's harder because I hate saying this, but kids are different because parents are different. We're all raised differently. And we all went through COVID. And the kids that I deal with now, those kids did not have a normal childhood experience. A lot of that was taken from them. The amount of screen time that they use is different. I'm fortunate that I live in this setting. My child can go outside and run around and play legitimately in a safe space where I may or may not know where he's at. And he comes back with his timer, beeps on his watch, and he's, hey, I'm back to check in. But we did that as a young age, but people don't do that anymore. Like that's not real. So I think that is what I started to realize, like how important these younger ages are when you're teaching kids how to advocate for themselves, when you're teaching kids it's okay to be vulnerable. You're trying to be everything that you may or may not have had as a kid growing up. So that's like the sweet spot. Like how do you show up to be someone that you may have needed during that time? I deal with kids that come from mixed backgrounds. The problems are different and they all got problems because we all like it's a human thing. We all have those, but to help kids go through those journeys so when they get 18, 19, 20, like they can handle whatever comes their way, that's like the important part of what I'm doing right now. And I think that just it impacts how I coach, knowing that it's bigger than just what's in the lines. And that's why I say all that to say before it was like the game. But when you're in college, that game puts food on the table for me. Here, it's not necessarily the same. And that there's real life outside of this game. And the game was just a vessel to teach all the lessons that you needed to.
For sure. No, I love that. And leads me to my next question, right? Where the first 2 years have been a little bumpy if we're looking at results and outcomes that show up in the left and right hand of the column, right? But in regards to culture and guys wanting to be around and not leaving the gym, which for 2 years has been what's happened with the program since you took over, what would you say is the best thing you do that has had the most transformational effect on the culture you're trying to create, right? That you could offer others in regards to, yeah, you know what? Sometimes the ball doesn't bounce the way you want, but big picture, the world is we're trying to grow young people and develop leaders and independence. And, you've had some success here. What's led to that you can offer others?
Yeah, I think sometimes you got to take a beat and realize that only a fraction of these kids are going to get the opportunity to play beyond like me. Um, and that's just high school in general. There's only so many college spaces. Doesn't matter the sport. How do you maximize every locker room? That's something I'm big on. No locker room is ever the same twice. So whether guys are graduating, transferring, new people coming in, like you can have a core that can they can drive like where you want your culture to be or your environment, but the locker room's never going to be the same twice. So I got to maximize that locker room. And at the end of the day, it's important for those kids to know that you care. It's important to show up consistently, which is something I'm trying to be as best as now that I just manage so many moving pieces. But I think being accessible is huge. Letting them know that, like, I try to tell my guys all the time, like, we can disagree. It's all good. I'm not saying I know everything. I promise you I don't. I will make mistakes. I feel like I have a decent idea because I've been around it, but I'm a sponge in every setting I'm in. And I think kids here I go again. Kids these days appreciate people that are really there for them. And that's, I don't know, that's like my goal. Like I need to impact. And so I just lead as you got to be a servant leader. What does that look like? I'm there to serve the kids. So how can I help them get through anything? I have life experience. I've seen and done some things. I've made good decisions. I've made bad decisions. And you have to use the power of story to help kids through that, right? And let them know that you're human too, right? Everything within bounds, but let them know that I've made bad mistakes. This is what it looked like for me. You're in a similar situation. These are your options. You do what's best for you. All right. And just how do you help coach them to that, but give them the agency and the trust that you believe in them. And so I think that just, I don't know, I guess that plays into it. I'm just me, but I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that's almost a question for the guys to answer.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not on the pod. Always just trying to, in your words, right, offer things up that people can be a sponge about if they're interested. And we all do things differently, right? But it's ultimately how are you authentic, right? And how do you share that authenticity with as many people as possible to serve the greater good? And I would push back a little bit and say it's not just kids these days that want to feel seen and valued and know that you're accessible, right? That's what kids need. And that's sometimes the role that we I don't want to say are forced to play, but by nature of the positions we're in coaching and education that you fall backwards into sometimes. So I think that's a great way to look at that. On that note, let me ask this follow up. As a guy that has played pretty much every role on a team, from being the leader to not even sniffing the court and just happy to be there, what are some ways that in 2 years you could look back and say, I wish I had a do-over on this in regards to making sure players feel that they have roles, players feel that they're seen, and that you're looking at as you move into next year to be better at, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm learning now, and I think I really caught on to it towards the middle to end of this year, in college, you are fortunate enough to recruit. In that setting, that means I, as a coach, I can have an idea and I can have a philosophy and I can say, this is what such and such university does, right? And now I can recruit individuals that fall in alignment with that, whether that be the types of players offensively or defensively, whether it's length, whether it's a certain amount of shooters or what you want out of your ball handlers. In high school, you are like you have what you have as far as your enrollment, then you don't control that. And so it's how do I again maximize the talent? And so like some of the things that I wish I could redo because when I came in, we had a lot of talent in that first year as an assistant, and we were already doing things that I was familiar with in terms of like dribble drives and motions and stuff. So that was like that was fine for me. Tons of similar concepts that I'd done multiple places. Now I'm getting to the point where if I could redo it, it's to properly assess like my roster and put kids in a position to be successful rather than putting them in positions that I think they could be successful isn't always in alignment. Like I may put you somewhere and it might be a little bit more or a little less than you're capable. So finding that right balance. And then how do I now script things a tad bit better where the pressure isn't on the players who I feel like they're working really hard to do the best they can, but it's just different. So I can't throw out adjustments and calls. Like sometimes when I say things, they'll look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language because I am, because it's, you use a terminology and it's, I've never heard that ice a ball screen. They're like, is there a trainer out here? What are we getting ice for? So it's, you have to help them understand the game. And so if you say that and that becomes too much, then how do you simplify? And so this year, I feel like I was able to do more schematically but still I have ways that I can simplify it for next year. So next year is all about clear communication with roles, simplifying things, and then putting guys in a position to where they could be successful, right? Thinking about offensively, we don't have a back to the basket guy, right? But how many back to the basket, true back to the basket guys are even out there in basketball in general at this level, right? So what do you do to, how do you scheme that with a bunch of guards and then one guard that happens to be 6'4" or 6'5", right? So just because they guard a post player, like how do they all work? That's not the kid that you necessarily want on a block somewhere, right? So just understanding like what my plug and play will be. And I've just been doing a lot of homework with that. So I think those are some of the biggest things that I've figured out. Less is more, pillars of what you stand for and what you believe in. I will tell you one of the best things that I've had in my 2 years since being a head coach is that people always say, man, your kids play hard. And I just don't like playing hard used to not be like a player trait. Like that came with the territory. I was of the cloth that like I wouldn't touch a floor if I wasn't playing hard. So I didn't have the luxury to not. But I understand that there are some people that are just crazy talented and the game just comes differently to them. And I get it. I've seen it at a lot of different levels. But as a collective, like my guys, like they play hard. Now we just gotta put the ball in the hole. We'll figure it out. But so it's just that's what we're trying to really do. I think in that first 2 years is just slow down a little bit. Yeah, slow down a little bit. You can't just throw the whole thing at them and expect them to grasp it.
Yeah, and that's part of the journey, right? And we talked about this in year one, and we reiterated it in year two. It's you got to figure out what you believe in, what you can teach, what you can get buy-in on, and that's part of the journey. And it's tough to just come in and flip the page and everything works the way you had seen it in your dreams. It's just not real. Let me ask this because we're at a place, obviously, where the director of athletics is extremely committed to multi-sport athletes and pushes that in a way that's abnormal for the modern age. How have you embraced the number of really high quality coaches that we have on this campus or other places and picked up some things that you might have not have thought about by watching the water polo team or the track team or whatever, and you've been able to infuse into your coaching journey?
Yeah, I think we're around. I don't know a high school that has probably. I think off the top of my head, I think I can think of six of their coaches that have played and or coached at the collegiate level. And I'm thinking of how many sports we have, like legitimately, like basketball. You're looking at your varsity, thinking like your varsity levels, even some of our like lower levels, but like soccer, water polo, men and women, like tons of coaches that have seen it and done it. So you just know that there's a level of professionalism that comes with that and how they carry themselves and the things that they want out of their athletes. The conversations across the board are a lot the same. And it's just how do we bridge the gap in each of our like areas, right? One of the people I will watch is our water polo coach on the girls' side. And I think about how Coach Burke is there was a playoff game and he's dude's a winner, right? There's a playoff game, and what was happening in the pool to see his composure, I remember telling him after the game, like, yo, I'd have lost it. And I'm not like a raw guy, but just like watching just how he just calm, professional, and then watching how his girls responded to that. So I pick up things like a ton of different ways. I know going out with Coach Kehoe, watching the lacrosse team and watching how they pass and cut, and just like, what is this? And talking about basketball drills with lacrosse, and people saying it's the same game, and I'm like, I don't think it's the same game. And then you start watching it, and theoretically, it's not far off, right? Um, Going down and watching and football and watching how those guys are showing up in the weight room now. We're trying to shift culture with our athletes and knowing that there's a battle to be won off the playing surface before we ever get on the playing surface, which was a big thing for Coach Drew Peterson at Humboldt for us. And he would walk in and him and Coach Manyweather, who runs like an offensive lineman training camp for pros now in Texas, like they would always walk in and tell us choices. Everybody got a choice. You show up and you show up here, get right, but the lights are gonna come on at some time and they would just hold you to that standard. So it was just like a no nonsense. We're always going to go work in that area, and just seeing kids like lean into that. And so I just watch how people carry themselves, how they organize their teams, how they motivate their teams, especially if they have more experience with the younger athletes. Coming into it, I had spent 8, 9 years with 19 to 24-year-old young men at the same point, or at that time. This time I'm dealing with anything from 13 to 18. So just they're in a different world, and just knowing that everyone's in different phases, like how do I reach that area? How do I have impact for those kids?
Yeah, and ultimately it just goes back to the idea of growth mindset, right? And where are you finding growth? You might not always have the ability to go to the latest clinic or be surrounded by people that have 25 years of basketball experience, but you can cherry pick right on your own campus and right in your own space if you get your eyes open and you look for it. And I love that you take time to do that. If we go back at any length in your career as an athlete, as a coach, as a parent, as a teacher, do you have any, or do you have let me ask this is what I stole from Tim Ferriss a long time ago, a favorite failure that has been transformational in your journey to where you are now that you point back to and say, yeah, this was the moment when things changed and I had to take account, and it's something that is an anchor for you, or maybe a couple little anecdote that you can share in regards to failing forward and figuring things out and not letting it be catastrophic, so to speak.
Yeah, I think obviously we talk about the role that we played in high school, which again you were a part of, and not a negative way, but getting cut that first year as a freshman and doing everything in terms of anything and everything that was offered. Because I'll tell kids all the time, like it was different for us growing up. We played basketball 330 days out of the year. Like we were always in a gym. And that was for a guy that wasn't even on the team, like was in it. Because you had spring and you had summer. So you did all of that. Like season ended, workout started, like you were there at the gym. Knowing that you had a missed opportunity the first time for whatever reason, probably something way out of my control, but not holding on to that and seeing how uh now like people transfer. So then I doubled down and it's okay, we're gonna do this again. And you get cut again. And the reasons are totally different. Was I the worst player? Absolutely not. Was I the best player? Absolutely not. But there was a jersey, and there was like knowing what you know now, there was a jersey, right? There was a jersey then, and there's definitely a jersey in my adult life, knowing what I know now, right? You have those different levels of adversity and or politics that play a role in it. And I think this is where my mom played a instrumental factor in just never letting me fail. And I think she had to do a lot of work that I didn't realize until I became a parent. And you're dealing with kids that have confidence issues, or I work with middle school kids, and you're dealing with kids that have confidence issues or they don't believe in themselves for whatever reason. I always turn to the work. I'm like, if I put in more work, I'll breed confidence by default, right? If I can't shoot, if I shoot thousands upon thousands of shots, then I will find the confidence, but there's a reality in which people still never find it. And that's where I go in, and I had a couple opportunities to leave and pivot. I had someone ask, "Well, you can come play over here." My brother at this point was going to a different school because I'm not going through any of that, but it just never crossed my mind. And my dad was one of those, this is where the fight is, so this is where we're going to fight. Like, you're going to step into this and you'll embrace this. And I don't realize, I guess, how hard that actually was looking back on it because I was just so in it to then go and have the opportunity to play, air quotes, my junior year, in which I was offered an opportunity to be a part of it, but at no point in time was I ever needed and or expected to play unless everybody on the team had the flu and was throwing up, and I had to be the one person on the court. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but like I wasn't playing. And we were really good. There was a ton of talent on that team. I think we lost 2 games that year, two or three. Like it was not like it was, yeah. So you were still a part of something great and special. And that I think was so important because those dudes worked hard and they didn't get it done. And I was just coming from working hard. And so at this point, it's just like in my DNA to where my senior year, 3 games in, I had the opportunity to start and just like never looked back. And so I will say that took me, I'm bad at math, but essentially 3 years, 900 days to achieve a goal in which I wanted since the age of 14 that I didn't actually have come to fruition until 17, 18. And that's the reality, but a lot of people don't hold on that long, whether it's sport, whether it's school or location, whether it's the job. again, going back to coaching and just being told no, or this profession is hard, or whatever you're doing isn't for you, I lean into those moments. I truly had the confidence that I think I could do anything. Like, there's a very few things that I don't think I can do, which is like the worst thing that when like I was sitting job interviews and people are like, oh, what do you want to do? Or what do you, I'm like, man, that's the worst question to ask me. And they're like, why is that? And I feel like I don't want to be arrogant, but I feel like I can do anything. And like, you think you can do my job? And I was like, is it open heart surgery? No. Then yes, I can do it. I'm not saying I'm gonna do it well. I'm not saying I'm gonna do it better than you to start, but if you give me some time, I'll figure it out. And I think it's all just been leaning into you don't know what you don't know. You are more capable than you give yourself credit for, and controlling what you can control. And then I think the last part of that is exposure leads to expansion. And so the more things that I've been exposed to, I've been able to expand my mind on. And that has allowed me to grow. I don't think you can grow if you don't have like space to expand, right? So if you're thinking about it and all your ideas fit in here, then it's going to be very easy for you to run out of ideas versus having an exposure that allows this to grow and now all the things that can fill in there and being able to unlearn bad behaviors because you know more now to relearn better ones. And I think that's like the constant battle that I'm in with work now. It's just like, was I raised? How does that apply to now? What new things can I bring? How do we change? Where direction is the world going? And so all of that I think stemmed from a long 3 years to get to a goal, but I apply that mindset to literally everything. So it just things don't really shake me. And I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. I'm weird, but yeah.
Yes, we can agree on that, but so am I, and I think that's what makes us all unique, how you find ways to pull for one another and get through the hard times. This doesn't have to be about coaching. This is something
Yeah.
that you've worn a lot of hats over the last 4 years, and with that exposure leading to experience, which then adds to your accumulation of wisdom, right? What would you say you have most recently changed your mind on to challenge a previously held belief, right? I used to be over here and now I'm over here, and here's why. And if it's coaching, great. If it's parenting, great. If it's your professional life, great. I'm just always curious how people are putting into practice the idea of challenging their own belief system to either strengthen it or to realize they were wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what I just said of knowing that you can unlearn poor behaviors or mm, actions that you've done because you now know better, right? And so I'll use the example that's just with coaching to start because it's an easy one. But as an assistant, I used to tell guys, oh, you need to go have that conversation with coach, right? You need to go do these things like walk to his office, boom. Kids aren't coming to have those conversations. Whether they should, whether you're open to having the conversations, whether you've said it a bunch of times, like, hey, look, door's always open. I live on campus. You guys can find me anytime. You can come down to my office at the lower school, whatever you need, right? We practice late just because of the way the gym slot is. It ain't like I got anything to do at 9:30, 9:45. So we can have whatever conversations we need to have. And the amount of conversations I'm not having was like, you need to change what you're doing. So I need to go initiate those conversations. I need to go approach those kids and let them know, hey, I'm noticing this. I just want to know how you're feeling. Is this a projection? Am I getting it right? This is what I'm feeling. And start the conversation. And then, especially at this day and age, like, or this level, you really, okay, something else is going on. When we were in college and Johnny comes in to go play and they can't throw it off the side of the backboard, and coach was like, what's going on? And you're like, oh, broke up with his girlfriend. Oh, bombed this test. Oh, had a phone call with somebody that's not doing well back home. And so you knew what the triggers were when guys showed up. Now that you're here and they're not like away from home, like you don't know what it is. And so to slow down and ask that question first, I think are some of the things that I've learned because the conversations still need to be had. You just got to initiate them. And I think once you get there, that is what opens up the doors to build relationships.
Can you peel back the layer a little bit more, especially in your role as the dean, right? Where, how do I say this appropriately? Tyler Brown, TB, is super approachable, but you put that title on now and it's nobody's trying to come talk to you. And how you have to shift, not just for modern day, but just for the age appropriateness of adolescence and where people are, right? How many out of 100 student athletes at our age group
Yeah.
are going to be able to bang on the door and say, "Yo, man, we need to talk," right?
Yeah.
Versus now everything's fine, right?
Right.
As Ali would say to us, fine is an acronym for feelings in need of expression, right? So, like, how are you realizing these things and now actively as you roll into year three, being more proactive about that just based on what you've learned, thinking that no, they're going to come knock on your door.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. First and foremost, never in my 30-year-old life, let alone my 25 or anywhere else beneath there, did I think I'd be a middle school dean of students. So I hold that in like deep regard, or it's this is one of those things where, hey, look, I'm here, but I'm not supposed to be here. Like in my mind, in a way, I feel like I have an opportunity to help kids and do some things, but it was never part of the plan of like me getting there. So I say that to say I don't hold that title with this level of I know it all. Because I'll be the first to tell you I don't. I'm actually very fortunate to have people in my lives that have been in the industry for a long time that I'm able to consistently and transparently pull wisdom from and take that to make educated decisions of how I carry myself in the workplace. And so I'm just a benefit of that. But with that being said, knowing that conversations are tough. Like I have conversations with middle school kids about tons of things, like tons of things. And it doesn't always get to this level, but you get to the point where you have to have like really difficult conversations. And it's like, what energy am I giving off to let you know that it's okay to take it to this like depth with me? Am I a vault? Am I holding? What am I holding? Am I just being a listener? Am I trying to help you through it? And a lot of people think like in my professional role, it's like the dean of students, you think like the dean of discipline, like you're coming in to be the sheriff, you gotta lay the hammer down. And that's a part of the job, but that's not all of the job. And so I feel like you are coaching in everything that you do because you want them to feel like it's okay to approach you. And that's like the same mentality I have, like whether it's middle school kids or it's high school kids. And so I don't know if that all the way answers the question, but I just feel like now, because you do hold the title, you just gotta, I'll give you this. I tell people all the time with our school model, like when we have people come visit, it is very easy for me to stand on top of the ladder and be like, you need to get to here, right? And say, we're going to be here to guide you and assist you. Real help and guidance looks like me coming down off the top, sticking out my hand, helping you climb the ladder, and not letting go until you're like stable. And so, bridging the gap to do that, like the first handout, is me going to initiate those conversations. So you have to be like, you have to be the starter. So like in the school setting, like I do that and I feel like I do it like quickly. Here, we get to basketball and I don't see them on the day to day as much as I do with like my middle school kids, where I can like if Susie is off today, like I could just see it, right? Like for whatever it is. Here, it's a little bit more disguised, right? Because by the time everything is so like timely, we're watching film at 7:30, and we're getting on the floor at 7:45, like we're into drills by 7:50, like we're rolling, okay? Because the time is very limited. So I don't get those like those flybys to peep like what normal life is. And I used to have that in college, right? Because you could walk on campus and kind of you check in on guys' classes and you just see where they're at. And so that's like a big thing of where I have to initiate those conversations. And I think we did a lot more like team meals, like I would just order Wingstop after practice. Guys would come in and eat after, and you have not everybody could stay, but at least they do something. It's not much. We've been fortunate enough to have some parents that would buy us team meals and help donate and support us. And all of those are like major building blocks for like our team and our camaraderie and kids believing in me and me being approachable. And I'm very big on like breaking bread together. I think those are some of the best moments and memories. You think about almost anyone's family, you think about big moments, they're around tables with food. And so it's whatever, it's a holiday or something, if you need to have some important conversations, have a meal there. You got to have that leveling piece because at the end of the day, everybody's got to eat. So it's worst push come to shove. At least we can come out here with a full stomach and it can't be that bad. Yeah.
Follow up.
Yep.
If the first step of helping them climb the ladder is to reach out and have some conversations, right? What else does it look like in your role as a coach when you're at a place like ours, where everybody is engaged in other activities outside of the season, and you're still trying to facilitate their basketball growth? What does that look like if you were to take it to the next level besides having your exit meetings and having just, hey, how are things? What does it look like as a actual basketball coach in regards to trying to help people get to that ladder versus, hey, if they care enough, they'll reach out to me?
Yeah, I think you got to figure out what time you have available because that's what it comes down to. It's time. Most of the kids will, for the most part, they're going to want to be a part of it if they have the time. And for the most part, you're going to want to do it if you have the time. Just saying, just time, like time on my end to get in the gym, get in the weight room, organize, execute, time on their end with their academics, their other sports, their social lives, personal lives to come in. Half our kids are going through the college applying gauntlet or college visiting setup. The other halves are now and their seniors are getting ready to figure out where they're going to college. So I think it looks like me creating space to do those things, and it looks like us finding intentional time that we have ahead of time to do meaningful things. We have an opportunity to go abroad this summer. I think that is a great example of us maximizing time together with kids where we're checking all the boxes. We are going to expose them to an international experience, which I don't think you just can't put a price tag on what that looks and feels like for a kid at that age. They get to do it with their peers that they care about. So they get to have a life-changing moment with some people that have played a major role in their life, with coaches that have helped to coach them. And that's majority of the coaches on our campus or people, faculty on our campus coach. And so a lot of our personal touch points are with quote unquote athletes because we're in practice and we spend car rides, bus rides, trips together. So I think being able to do things like that are super important, and not everybody's able to do it. So we're very fortunate to have that opportunity in front of us, and our kids can come in and be able to have that experience, which will be once in a lifetime. And then I think finding time for us to just get together. Like I tell kids all the time, they can always stop by. I got a grill for Christmas, so I've had my own like cookouts as my trial and error of what my grill skills look like. I'm going back to high school me thinking I'm not going to college just so I can be a chef. So it's just anything to be creative. And yeah, just like the pepper over the message, like, hey, I'm doing this at this time. You guys are free to come if you want. And you'd be surprised. Coach Gasperson had done that a couple times. The next thing you know, we end up at Gianni's Pizza with 10 deep. We didn't expect this to happen. And then almost to the point where the other kids are like, where's so and so? No, they had to study or do this. Oh, they couldn't have come for a couple minutes. I get it. It was last minute, but they just like to be around each other. Man, high school goes quick. High school goes quick, and you got to enjoy it. I mean,
I would say that piece just there that you didn't bring up the first time around in culture building, where, hey, we're going to do this. Y'all are welcome to come, right? Those are little seeds that people can drop that go further than you think. And I think the long way around getting to that's something that people that made it this far can steal from. All right, let me wrap with this just because I think it'll be funny. What would you say is the most absurd memory you have of our time together when you were younger that won't get me fired?
the most absurd memory I have. Oh, yeah, this is just one of many. I'm the first person to say that I think Coach Clymo's like crazy, but he loves hard, and I'll appreciate that, and I'll appreciate the man that he's been in my life and the role that he's played. But we had to do fundraising, and you'll probably remember the story about the fireworks. So we had to do fundraising, and fireworks stands are big business, which I also didn't realize. I ran a fireworks stand, me and my boy, when we were coaching for an AAU team in Humboldt. And so it's big business. And yeah, somebody wrote a check and they're not supposed to write a check. And you went to the address and took the fireworks back. And my dad, I just remember him telling me that story. And he was like, yeah, Coach Clown, that's a wild ass white boy. So I just feel like I can't think like you can't just knock on people's door and just take things back is wild. And so you're like, nah, that's ours. Here's your check. Didn't it like we don't do that. The check like bounced. You went to the address on the check and got the fireworks back. And part of me just goes like part of that just goes to show that like you were not gonna let anybody cheat the kids. That money went to the kids. That money went to whatever we were doing in the summer. We were fortunate to go to team camps and all these other places, and we didn't, that I can remember, pay for those things out of pocket. We did a ton of fundraising. And so that person essentially was going to cheat 15, 16 kids out of an opportunity because that's where that fundraising money was going. And you just were like, that's just not going to happen on my watch. And so in my adult life, you think about like how serious people are or like what it means to care about kids or like what you're doing or who you're doing it for. And that's a prime example where it's just like, yeah, not for these kids. Knowing like the kids that we had on the team and the kids that like we needed like that to make it work, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was absurd. I got plenty more, but
No,
yeah,
we'll
that was
save those for another day. But that's funny. I do remember it now that you're telling me about it, and it's exactly what went down. We had to go repossess the fireworks. Hey man, listen, I appreciate you jumping on and helping me out at a time in need. Looking forward to what else is coming our way and looking forward to this thing dropping in the near future.
You got it. Appreciate your time always.